I think the most important thing when you are engaging with shareholders is just understanding who the shareholders are and what their specific preferences are. So part of that, and kind of core to what we do at MacKenzie Partners, is stock identification and stock monitoring. And we have a team of about 11 people in New York to help us go through that. And they have been doing this a long time, and they're experts at trying to look behind the veil of who the shareholders are. And once you have that list in front of you, and it's actually a little bit more difficult than it sounds, then you can go through that and try and figure out when to engage and how to engage with all those shareholders. So I think from the company's perspective, the most important thing to do is to treat engagement as kind of a year-round exercise. If all you're doing is engaging with your shareholders when you need something, especially if it's ahead of an annual meeting or a special meeting vote, typically that's a little bit less productive. So I think you really need to treat engagement as an opportunity to not only get your message across, but to learn things from your shareholders on an ongoing basis. And once you have those relationships established ahead of time, I think any kind of engagement can be more productive after that. When you're trying to figure out when to engage with shareholders and how to engage, especially when you're dealing with a specific issue, when you're trying to get their support on something, you have to understand the question that's kind of relevant in this case. So let's say that you have a proposal on special meetings, on being allowed to call special meetings as a shareholder. One of the things that you should understand going into that engagement is how each of your shareholders views special meeting proposals and how they're likely to vote and how they voted historically on those proposals. And by looking at that data on a kind of backwards looking basis, you can kind of make your conversations with shareholders a lot more productive because you know what their touch points are, you know what they're going to be focused on. There's a wealth of data out there on shareholder voting, and obviously the policies and guidelines of most of the major institutional shareholders are widely available. But it's really important, I think, to drill down on the specific data points that are going to be most relevant to your particular situation. So it's helpful in some cases to look at aggregate voting data, so all types of proposals in the past that this particular shareholder has voted on. But what might be more helpful is to look at a particularly analogous situation. So if you can say that there was a similar proposal at a similar company that was up for a vote last year, and this is how the shareholder voted on it, that's going to give you a much more direct line of sight into their potential voting behavior in the future than just looking at all proposals and unrelated companies and that sort of thing. Going into shareholder engagement, there are kind of three questions that you have to answer. It's the who, so who do you bring from your side to engage? It's what, what do you talk about? What are the key issues that are going to resonate with this particular shareholder? And when, so when do you engage? Anytime that you kind of mess up one of those questions, that's where the engagement becomes less productive. If you're engaging at the wrong time of the year, say you're trying to do a deep, meaningful engagement in the middle of proxy season, that's usually not going to be very productive. Or if it's a compensation issue and you're bringing the CEO to the conversation to talk about his or her own compensation, that's going to be a challenge. So really just understanding the kind of key preferences at each institutional investor really helps to go along to answer all those questions and make sure engagement's productive.